The only way to fight inflation is to remove all the inflation from the economy that the Fed put in there. So they have to shrink their balance sheet. They have to let interest rates go way up. They have to force the government to slash government spending. But unfortunately, none of that's going to happen. This recession is going to get much worse.
Peter Schiff makes it clear, to address inflation effectively, we must reverse the Fed's actions by reducing their balance sheet, raising interest rates significantly, and compelling the government to cut spending. Unfortunately, the recession will likely worsen if these steps aren't taken. Welcome back to Finance Zoom. Today, let's dive into the insights about the economic storm from renowned economist Peter Schiff. According to Schiff, our economic future holds significant challenges. He warns of clear signs of an impending economic storm based on his track record of accurate predictions. While the economist highlighted that America's battle with inflation is about to get trickier, cooling price rises will have counterintuitive consequences for the Federal Reserve. The forecasts of worsening inflation and a potential 2023 recession have positioned us at a critical economic crossroads. Policymakers recently underscored these concerns with their 11th rate hike in 12 meetings on July 26. This rapid monetary tightening marks the most significant approach taken by the U.S. in 4 decades, yet uncertainties cloud the central bank's future path. Amid this backdrop, some economists speculate that this rate hike might conclude the Fed's current cycle. The inflation surge of 2022 has started to ease, with June's consumer prices rising just 3% year over year. While core inflation is more resilient, showing some resistance, it also signals that underlying pressures are gradually diminishing. This shift offers a window for the Fed to embrace a milder approach, aiming for a soft landing. The outcome remains uncertain due to intricate economic dynamics intertwined with policy decisions. Turning to impactful headlines, Peter Schiff's statement on the Fed's changing recession outlook is noteworthy. Previously, a recession seemed unlikely over the past 18 months. Shifting focus, Powell initially adopted a hawkish tone at the meeting, hinting at potential rate increases. However, his stance progressively shifted to a more dovish one, potentially indicating a forthcoming weak employment report and credit weakness. This shift influenced the 5-year yield, which fell about 7 to 8 basis points. Although Powell aimed to regain some hawkish ground, the overall sentiment leaned slightly dovish, aligning with my perspective. Interestingly, Peter Schiff holds a different viewpoint.
The Fed's going to start cutting before inflation gets down to 2%. And the thing that's significant is the main reason we got the drop in headline CPI from 9% to 3% was that we got a near 50% drop in oil prices from the summer of 2022 until about a couple of months ago. But in the last 3 months, oil prices are up 25%. I think we're just starting a new move that's going to take oil prices to new highs, and that's going to put a lot of upward pressure on headline CPI before the end of the year, and that's also going to push a downward pressure on the economy.
Peter Schiff's analysis highlights a significant statement by former Fed Chair Jerome Powell, which has far-reaching implications. What stands out is that the Fed is preparing to lower interest rates well before inflation drops to its target of 2%. Peter suggests that the Fed might start cutting rates. At the same time, the Consumer Price Index continues to rise, which is a departure from their previous stance of avoiding rate cuts this year. The recent behavior of oil prices is a crucial factor here. Peter emphasizes that the sharp decline in the headline Consumer Price Index from 9% to 3% was mainly due to a nearly 50% drop in oil prices from mid-2022 until a few months ago. However, oil prices have surged by 25% in the last 3 months. Peter predicts that this upswing marks the beginning of a new upward trend that could eventually push oil prices to new highs, which in turn may contribute to higher consumer price index, possibly before the year's end. This interplay of factors could have dual effects, with rising oil prices increasing inflation and potentially putting downward pressure on the overall economy. These insights illustrate the intricate relationship between economic indicators and the Fed's policy decisions. Now let's delve into the two central concerns.
So I think the Fed is wrong on its recession outlook. We're going to have a recession. In fact, it's going to be a severe one, but inflation is going to get worse, not better.
1. Escalating inflation. Peter Schiff raises several essential concerns. Initially, he highlights the gap between officially reported inflation rates and the dollar's purchasing power erosion. This prompts him to advocate for a shift towards assets like gold and investments that perform well amid rising inflation. Responding to Powell's remarks, Schiff presents a differing viewpoint. He challenges the Fed's stance on an impending recession, asserting instead that a severe recession is on the horizon. In contrast to the Fed's projection, Schiff believes that inflation is poised to worsen rather than improve. In essence, Schiff's feedback underscores the significance of uncontrolled inflation and its repercussions on the economy. He also emphasizes his divergent perspective on the potential recession. Additionally, he points out Powell's considerable apprehension about prematurely discontinuing stimulus measures.
The worst outcome for everyone, of course, would be not to deal with inflation now, not get it done. Whatever the short-term social costs of getting inflation under control, the longer-term social costs of failing to do so are greater, and that the historical record is very, very clear on that. If you go through a period where inflation expectations are not anchored, inflation is volatile, it interferes with people's lives and with economic activity, and that's the thing we really need to avoid and will avoid.
Powell's urgency to address inflation is loud and clear. He stresses that the immediate consequences of not acting far outweigh the potential short-term impacts of tackling inflation head-on. Historical evidence underscores uncontrolled inflation's havoc on lives and economies, amplifying Powell's determination to prevent this outcome at all costs. In contrast, Peter Schiff challenges Powell's stance. He questions if the Fed might be overly reactive to temporary factors. Peter contends that the present economic landscape doesn't warrant the current interest rates, disagreeing that a recession looms. Diverging from Powell's inflation-centric focus, Peter highlights the stark increase in national debt over the past 2 decades. He raises a red flag about the repercussions of sustaining this debt burden amid higher interest rates. He foresees a scenario where debt interest payments surpass even the defense budget.
The problem is rates are only too high because we have too much debt, thanks to the Fed. We can't afford these rates. To put this in perspective, 22 years ago, which was the last time we had 5.5% Fed funds, the national debt was $5.6 trillion.
Peter Schiff's perspective casts doubt on the alignment of Powell's approach with the current economic landscape. Peter's skepticism revolves around the appropriateness of the prevailing interest rates and their potential to magnify the repercussions of the escalating national debt. He reinforces his viewpoint by illustrating the correlation between interest rates and the national debt. Looking back 22 years, the last time a 5.5% interest rate prevailed, the national debt stood at $5.6 trillion. Peter points out that if this same rate were applied to today's national debt, the interest payments would amount to $1.8 trillion. Comparing this sum to the defense budget, which stands at $840 billion, he underscores how interest payments on the debt have now exceeded double the national defense spending. In essence, Peter Schiff's feedback emphasizes his belief that the current approach to interest rates, compounded by the mounting national debt, raises significant concerns about the situation's economic viability and long-term sustainability.
But the problem is the debt's going to keep on rising. And so the interest cost is going to keep getting higher. What's going to cause the Fed to start cutting is a solvency crisis at the government level and also on the corporate and personal level. It's not going to be inflation coming down. And in fact, when the Fed has to start easing in the face of high inflation, it's going to be throwing gasoline on an inflation fire, and inflation is going to be making new highs. And so all the problems that Powell is talking about are going to get much worse for the middle class and the working poor, who are going to be decimated by higher inflation.
2. The controversy of mandated recession. Peter Schiff's assertion that recession is a must has sparked a debate. He addresses the problem of rising debt, arguing that recessions are necessary to correct imbalances caused by excessive stimulus. However, intentionally inducing a recession raises ethical concerns about trading short-term pain for long-term stability. Schiff's view challenges prevailing ideas. He contends that rising debt will lead to a solvency crisis, not declining inflation. If the Fed eases amidst high inflation, it could fuel even more inflation, disproportionately harming the middle class and working poor. In essence, Schiff's perspective highlights the intricate balance between policy decisions, economic stability, and their impact on various segments of society. Peter Schiff's perspective on inflation will get worse, recession is a must, addresses the problem of rising debt, implicating both the Fed and the U.S. government. He contends that excessive stimulus programs fueled by the government's deficit spending, enabled by the Fed's monetary policies, have led to a dangerous debt accumulation. Schiff asserts that this debt-driven situation could ignite a crisis at any moment. In the investment landscape, Schiff advocates for cautious choices. He emphasizes the attractiveness of T-bills with their current yields, considering them a safe option. However, he believes that T-bills may not provide actual safety given the natural rate of inflation, which he deems higher than the reported consumer price index. To counter the eroding purchasing power of the dollar, Schiff recommends diversifying away from the dollar and into real assets like gold, dividend-paying stocks located outside the United States, basic materials, energy, and agriculture. He advises against relying on traditional investments like high-multiple tech stocks and financials, urging a portfolio shift to align with an environment of potentially higher-than-expected inflation and long-term insurance rates. Schiff's investment advice is guided by the lessons of the 1970s, where he sees parallels to the current situation and anticipates that inflation-sensitive assets and strategies will be more effective in this context. What do you think about this topic? Let me know in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Finance Soon channel. I'll see you in the next video.